Thank you for being here today. As you can see, your lunch is about to be served. We'd like to welcome you to the first annual North Alabama Real Estate Economic Summit. Today's event brings together some of the most insightful, some of the most knowledgeable, and individuals from across the country, from our region, from our city, but most importantly for all of us in this room, from our industry. Today we're going to hear from our city leader, Mayor Tommy Battle, from Ethan Hadley, who is the Vice President of the Economic Development with the Chamber of Commerce, Huntsville, Madison County, one of the foremost authorities on housing economics in the country, Dr. Lawrence Yoon, with the National Association of Realtors. Our goal today is to provide a forum of information that you will find relevant to our conditions, our uniquely positive conditions in North Alabama. We hope to empower you with knowledge, with insight that will help you better serve your clients. And with that said, I would like to invite the Honorable Judge Riddick and Bill Ward to the stage. Judge Riddick is going to lead us in our invocation, and then Bill Ward will lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance.
Would you bow with me, please? Dear God, we come at this time giving you thanks for the many blessings that we enjoy. We're so thankful, dear God, for the success of our realtors, and we pray that through unity of purpose, they can continue to provide this very important service to our community. We pray, dear God, for our President Obama, as he prepares to unveil a jobs program. We pray that it will be successful and that many of the unemployed will go back to work. At this time, we give thanks for our food and help us to remember those in the world that may be hungry, and we pray that some way they can be fed. This is our prayer. Amen.
Please stand and face the flag. And I encourage you, as we approach September 11th, to think about these words as you say them and not just say them by rote. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you.
Thank you, Judge Riddick. Thank you, Bill. We also want to thank today's sponsors. Their generous contributions and their support. Without it, we absolutely would not have been able to do this. Our sponsors today are the Alabama Association of Realtors, MetLife Mortgage, and the Huntsville Times. So thank you to them. We also are so blessed to have so many special guests with us today, and we would like to recognize them as well, beginning with Representative Howard Sandifer from the 20th District. Madison County Commissioners, I think some of them ended up not being able to be with us, but we have Jerry Craig, Commissioner Bob Harrison, Commissioner Roger Jones, Commissioner Phil Riddick, and Commissioner Dale Strong. Thank you for being here with us. Our Huntsville Mayor, Tommy Battle, who we will hear from shortly. Madison Mayor Paul Finley, our Alabama Real Estate Commissioners, Steve Cawthon and Cliff Miller. The Executive Committee from the Alabama Association of Realtors. Our officers and directors from the Huntsville Association of Realtors. And last but certainly not least is our past presidents of the Huntsville Association of Realtors. Without the guidance of them, without their leadership that they provide, our association would not be what it is today. They have given us an unbelievable strong foundation, and we appreciate them. And now I would like to introduce Oscar Gonzalez, who will be our facilitator for today. Dr. Oscar Gonzalez serves as the CEO for the Huntsville Area Association of Realtors. He's recognized as one of the nation's top thought leaders in housing industry. He's a nationally known speaker and author on real estate trends, affordable housing, consumer behavior, business modeling and planning. His comments have been published in the USA Today, the Wall Street Journal, the New York Times, the Los Angeles Times, the Chicago Tribune, the Washington Post, the Kiplinger Letter, and it just goes on. He's also been published in multiple business and real estate journals, and is a regular commentator on National Public Radio. He has been named by the Realtor magazine as one of the 25 most influential people in real estate nationwide, as an industry icon by the Broker Agent magazine, and currently he serves as the 2009-2011 National Association of Realtors President Liaison to Mexico. He also holds a BBA in accounting, an MBA in international business and finance. I told him right here I was going to insert MBA and see if y'all caught that. A PhD in business administration, and has earned a postdoctorate certificate from strategy and innovation from MIT Sloan School of Management. With all of that said, you can see why we are so fortunate and so proud to have him working with us at the Huntsville Board of Realtors. Please join me in welcoming Dr. Oscar Gonzalez.
See, I'm a lot smarter than I look. Now, the one thing about podiums is this particular podium makes me look tall, does it not? I think it kind of does. So, it's a real honor to have the guests that we have here today, to be able to host an event like this and have our members participate so willingly. I really appreciate you being here, because this speaks volumes to the confidence that you have in our economy. It's sometimes difficult to gauge what true economic conditions are. I mean, given the amount of information that we're given from multiple sources in the media, it's really hard to say, what our next direction should be. There's a recent survey that was put out by Grant Thornton that found that there's been a dramatic quarter-on-quarter decline in the levels of business optimism. What does that mean? Well, they measure how optimistic people are about the economy. And although the levels of optimism are pretty low, and I mean they're higher than they were in the past, they are higher than they were a year ago. So knowing that the confidence is starting to build, it's building very, very slowly. And of course, information like that leaves us even more confused, and we have trouble finding out which sources are accurate and which sources are not, and it leaves us to interpret some of that stuff. Today's home buyers, though, are inundated with that same type of information, and rather than help, I think a lot of you will find, as you've communicated to me, that it provides misinformation and more confusion for the consumer. And it leaves the realtor having to work doubly hard to either confirm or discredit that information. So it's overwhelming. I think we're in an information overload, if you will. Educating the consumer is critically important, especially in today's knowledge economy and knowledge society. Some of you have heard me say this before, and so if I'm repeating myself, I apologize, but I strongly believe it. And that is that staying relevant with today's home buyer is with today's home buyer means that as an industry and as individuals, it is critically important that we have access to and communicate accurate information at a minimum. I think a lot of times we're trying to keep pace with the consumer, and we're lagging a little behind, and simply because of the information or misinformation that we sometimes hear. Our value proposition as an industry must come in the form of being the convergence point, if you will, for relevant real estate information. I think it's critically important that as an industry, we become that, and your associations should be that source of information for you. So it's in that spirit that we're hosting this Real Estate Economic Summit. We have brought together, as Valerie indicated, individuals to share their economic insight on the local, on regional, and more importantly on the national level to see what kind of relevance it has to us. Is it really applicable to North Alabama or Alabama in general? I think being informed about the business environment that we're working under is critical. We need to know the conditions of the battlefield out there in order to stay relevant with our consumers. So with that being said, I want to introduce our first guest, who's no stranger to many of you. He and I play basketball on the weekends, and he lets me win. No, I'm just kidding. For those of you who don't know who Tommy Battle is, you're really missing out. He's been an amazing supporter of our industry, and just a phenomenal guy to work with, and one of the nicest people you will ever meet. Now, Eula Battle, his wife, may not share that same thought, but we do. We like him. We like him at the association. But let me tell you a little bit about him. In 2008, Mayor Tommy Battle was overwhelmingly elected as mayor of Huntsville. Since that time, Huntsville, Alabama, I should say, has received an unprecedented list of national and international recognitions under his leadership, even during one of the worst economic crises since the Great Depression. USA Today, Forbes, CNN, Moody's, Money Magazine, Belkin Institute, Fox News, Mad Magazine, I just made that one up, and many more have pointed out the incredible heights that Huntsville has reached under his leadership. It's been amazing. In Mayor Battle's first year in office, the city of Huntsville was named as the #1 city in America by Kiplinger's Personal Finance in 2009. Those heights were reached again in 2010 when Huntsville was named the #1 city in the nation by Relocate America, and for the second straight year received the AAA bond rating by both S&P and Moody's. In other words, we have a higher bond rating than the United States government. So under Mayor Battle, okay? Pretty good. Earlier this year, ground broke on the billion-dollar Redstone Gateway development, showing that under Mayor Battle's leadership, small business continues to thrive, not just here in Huntsville, but also in the region. So if you will help me welcome Mayor Tommy Battle.
Oscar, thank you very much. All right, I have to put the mic up a little bit. That's why I win in basketball. I was asking at the table, said, do they still publish Mad Magazine? Have Alfred E. Newman sitting there saying, what, me worry? That's, we are very, very fortunate. One of the things I think that we can say is thank goodness we live here in Huntsville, Alabama. And when I say Huntsville, I mean a generic Huntsville, the community of Huntsville, which is the city of Madison, with my friend Paul Finley here, Madison County with our county commissioners here. It's an area that we all work together. We all work together for future growth. And we work together for growth of our community, to see if our community can grow. This year we just rolled out our budget today. And when we rolled out our budget, one of the things that you're going to notice is that there's that one of our emphasis this year is on basic services. It's getting back to basics. It's boom trucks, garbage trucks, police cars. It's not the things that you really get plaques for or anything else, but it's just things that are fundamental, have to be done, repaving of roads. And that's one of the things that we're looking at. But secondly, you're going to see that we've got $36 to $50 million put into infrastructure. Infrastructure is what drives this community and drives us to be able to grow year after year, and that's what we've been working on. You're going to see that there's some reorganization in there. That reorganization is talking about getting ready for our building construction trades, because we're starting to see a lot of activity out there. Ethan's going to tell you in a few minutes that we're meeting pretty much on a twice to three times a week basis with them, talking about people who are looking at coming into the city of Huntsville. The BRAC movement, we just got finished with the direct jobs that have come here with BRAC movement, 4,700, 4,900 direct jobs coming in. And if you remember the 1995 BRAC movement, when Army Aviation Command moved here, right after that, you have a lag of 1, 2, 3 years in which all the support personnel start moving in here. The people who want to be close to their client, their customers of Redstone Arsenal, customers of AMC, customers of MDA, and they want to be close to their client. And I'm looking for us to have almost a 5-year period where we have 5,000 to 10,000 more people move in here. Now, everybody, we start talking about people moving in here. We've seen some terrific growth at Redstone Arsenal, 47 tenants at Redstone Arsenal, government tenants, and we've seen growth out of every one of them. Ethan and some of the chamber folks and I and Paul have been at the Quad A conventions, which is Army Aviation conventions. We've been at the AUSA conventions, which is the Association of the U.S. Army conventions, and every one of those are reporting growth coming in. You know, you can read a lot about the budgets and everything else, but each one of those agencies are looking at expanding their role of what they're doing here. And one of the things that we're working with each one of those is that if they're administering contracts here and the work is going to the West Coast, to the East Coast, we try to tell them that they need to have a location, they need to have presence here in Huntsville. And having a presence here in Huntsville means that we have that person, boots on the ground, that is spending that $80,000 a year. The total impact of BRAC, when you get the 10,000 people moved here, $80,000 a year, is $800 million impact year in, year out for this area. $800 million, and that $800 million is going to be spent on houses, on retail goods, on sales tax. It's going to be spent all the way across the board on all the ideas that make our economic engine go forward. And that's what we're looking at. And then you go beyond what we're seeing at Redstone Arsenal. We've had Raytheon come in, 300 jobs. Contracting Command come in, 300 more jobs. Beyond that, you look over at Hudson Alpha. They just broke ground on an 88,000 square foot addition to the facility that they've already got on their 153-acre biotech campus. And then you go around and look at Toyota. They're about to have the ribbon cutting on their 4-cylinder engine line. 4-cylinder, 6-cylinder, 8-cylinder engines. The only place in the world that makes all 3 engines for the Toyota plant. And then you look all the way around and you look at our medical area. And then look, and you can see that where regional growth is happening there. And then you look at Research Park, and we're seeing more and more growth come from areas that are beyond the government. We have an energy initiative working right now. There are 27 companies sitting out at Research Park working on energy. Everything from cogeneration to conservation. Karina is working on how to cut off your hot water heater. Everybody says, now how does that help? That shaves your peak time. If they're working your hot water heater at night rather than during the day, it shaves your peak time. We have Aries, who is one of the consultants to the People's Republic of China for 3rd-generation nuclear plants that they're going to be putting into China. We have a number of companies. Wiley Lab, over half of its business is from certifying nuclear plants. We have 27 companies sitting right here in the energy field, and that's where we're going to be working in the future. We're going to expand that base. We also have some efforts going on in the cyber energy area, where we work with cyber energy so that when you have a telecommunications or a teleprocessor working with a computer, and both of those are working together, you can make sure that you have security on those. And that's a big buzzword in the Army right now. That's where some of our expansion and some of our growth is going to come, not only next 5 years, but the next 10, 15, 20 years. And we have the workforce that can do it. More degreed professionals and engineers per capita than anywhere else in the U.S. When you look across the board, we have a bright future. We have a good future for us. But we have to keep working at it and keep working at that future. So my job as mayor has been to, number one, make sure that we get everything we can out of the assets that we already have. But number two, let's look at 5, 10, 15 years from now and see where we're going to expand our job markets, where we're going to have those future people coming into this market who will spend that $80,000, $90,000, $100,000 a year in this market. We've had some great success so far, and it's only been with your help. If you'll keep helping us, we'll keep on having that success, and we'll keep looking for a great future for Huntsville. Thank you.
See, now geeks and nerds save the day. See, you guys made fun of us in high school. It's different now. Thank you, Mayor Battle. I think his leadership has just been amazing, and I think bringing those types of industries and that kind of diversity of industry to our community has just been phenomenal. There's no organization I think works harder than the individual from this next organization to keep North Alabama on the global map than the Huntsville-Madison County Chamber of Commerce. They've been instrumental in consistently putting our region's best foot forward, and it is through the efforts of our next speaker that they've been able to do so. Ethan Hadley is our next speaker, and he is the Vice President of Economic Development for the Chamber of Commerce of Huntsville-Madison County. Let me tell you a little bit about Ethan. He's responsible for organizing and executing an aggressive, ongoing marketing program to stimulate a high level of corporate development interest in the Huntsville area. That is a mouthful. And I know he does that well because he works just as late as I do, because I see his car parked in the parking lot well into 10 o'clock at night. His goal is to direct greater business development and investment project activity to Huntsville-Madison County by educating site location consultants and executives in targeted industries about unique opportunities in Huntsville. In addition to his primary responsibilities, Hadley serves on the board of directors of the Japan-American Society of Alabama, the Alabama-Germany Partnership, and the International Services Council of Alabama. Prior to joining the Chamber, Ethan was Director of Asian Business Development for the Alabama Development Office, working out of, now see if you can conceptualize this, the State of Alabama office in Tokyo. Okay, see if you can conceptualize that. State of Alabama office in Tokyo. He lived and worked in Japan for 15 years after graduating from the University of North Carolina in Chapel Hill. Please help me welcome Ethan Hadley.
Thanks, Oscar. Good afternoon. I hope you haven't got your cake yet, and it's nothing to slow you down here. I guess one thing we haven't done so well is show time, our slides before we get started in this. So there'll be a fair amount of redundancy, and the good news for you is that I'll get finished speaking more quickly. The mayor is correct. We've gotten so many good things going on here. Oscar, thank you for the nice words for the chamber, which has been going on, established in 1894, so has been around working economic development for quite some time here, certainly long before I moved here from Japan 8 years ago. And so I'm just going to go through some slides here, and I hope y'all get something from it. I see my realtor there who sold me my house, Sherry. And hopefully learn something new about it. I know a lot of people sitting in this room that are from the area, they may pick up a few things too, but I'll just go ahead and get started. The modern history of Huntsville is relatively short. We're talking about 70 years here. In 1940, we were the watercress capital of the world, so all the garnishes on your plate, wherever you're eating them around the country, probably came from here. And at that time, the government set up two arsenals, one to produce chemical munitions for World War II, even though we weren't in it yet, and another arsenal to put that stuff inside the shells and get it off out in the field. After the war, both of those were shut down and put up for sale, and we were very fortunate, to make a long story short, to have Dr. Werner von Braun and his German rocket team relocated here by the government to start what is now our National Missile Defense Program. And as a part of that, also to kick off our civil aerospace, or NASA, and get us moving towards space, which is what happened here in the 50s and the 60s. And as you know, in the real estate field, that was a pretty exciting time because we were just popping up houses like mushrooms and schoolrooms and everything that supports that kind of growth. And that got us through the Mercury, the Gemini, the Apollo programs, got us to the moon, and we had a little bit of a hiccup here after that, as you might imagine, because you get that been there, done that philosophy, and companies did downsize or move out. But we've been able to learn how to deal with those type of situations over the year and rebuild on our strengths and then rebuild on some new strengths that we didn't know that we had yet that have evolved. And some of those strengths that have evolved out of the work on Redstone Arsenal are technologies that came out of work that was done there and got us into electronics, into diversified manufacturing, and then we started in the 90s to start being affected by a process called base realignment and closure. If you're not familiar with that, that's the Department of Defense's process of right-sizing itself and getting the right number of facilities and creating the right number or the right efficiencies to make them less costly and more efficient. In 1995, we received the Army Aviation Command, which came here and merged with the Missile Command, and so we started to not only be the nexus for missile stuff in the nation, we also became the head of Army Aviation. And that BRAC process, combined with the 2005 BRAC process, which was signed by President Bush in 2005, have caused us to have these long spurts of growth related to the growth on Redstone Arsenal. I'll talk about in a minute about BRAC and biotech in a little bit more detail. And I know Julie here said that she likes pie charts. I intentionally made this not a pie chart, but if it were one, aerospace and defense would be over half of it. So that seems like a lot. It is a lot. We do a lot to diversify our industrial base, to reduce our dependence on federal spending. But when the federal government continues to realize opportunities and synergies related to Redstone Arsenal and Cummings Research Park, et cetera, here, and put more stuff here, it's harder to get those scales in balance. So the ongoing challenge is to also diversify, and we've done that in advanced manufacturing, have one of the highest concentrations of IT professionals here in the country, and more recently we've added life sciences to that list, which started up here in 1987 and has evolved gradually and then more dramatically in recent years. And that note up there on the screen, that's U.S. Census based, what Mayor Battle referenced before, the highest concentration of engineers in the country. That's a real jaw dropper for people from out of our area, out of our state, when they see that and say, huh? Really? Okay, but it's true. It's based on the census. And when you have a lot of smart people coming in over decades and doing things that are being funded primarily by federal spending, you get a lot of big companies that come in and follow behind them. But they're all, of course, aerospace and defense companies. We have over 60 different foreign-based companies represented in the county, which is a pretty astounding figure for a medium-sized community in the U.S. Southeast. And it gives us a good cosmopolitan complexion. And having come from Tokyo after 15 years, that was a big deal for me and my family, is to go to a place that has got a lot of different stuff going on in it and a lot of different people living there. Our leading employers, Redstone Arsenal and its largest tenant, as the mayor mentioned, there are 47 tenants on there, but the largest single one is NASA, and that's how we got our name, the Rocket City. But in reality, today, only about 20% of the work on the arsenal that's done is related to NASA, and the other 80% is due to U.S. Army and other federal related organizations. Again, trying to diversify the right side there, our commercial employers, we have a very good list of those. It's a constant effort that we go through to make sure that we continue to do that and to build on our non-government presence, while at the same time increasing that base there as well. We have some unique assets, and international airport, which makes a lot of people scratch their heads. How do you have an international airport in Huntsville, Alabama? Well, it's cargo. And we are now certified to have the 747-8 series land here in a cargo configuration, load up, or unload, load up, and get going again in 2 hours. And try to do that in Memphis or Atlanta. It's just not going to happen. So you see the cargo yard, and we have 2 runways that are split a mile apart. One of them is the second longest runway in the southeast, only 200 feet shorter than Miami International. I think if Senator Shelby had known that, probably it would be at 201 feet longer. That's another story. This is what we call our trade area, and in that area there are about 1.3 million people, and about 32,000 of them commute for jobs here. So that's a big deal, and they're coming from surrounding counties in northeast Alabama, northern Alabama, and south central Tennessee. So we're supporting a larger population base than just what's in our 2-county metropolitan statistical area that's defined by the federal government. We've had good growth. We compare ourselves to other technology-led communities that have research universities, such as Austin, Texas, such as Raleigh-Durham, North Carolina. And we do relatively well in population growth. One thing to remember there is what I just said. Our metropolitan statistical area is defined by the U.S. government as 2 counties. That's Madison County, where you're sitting in right now, and then to the west of us, Limestone County. But in actuality, the population and the labor force pool that supports everything that goes on here lives all around us as well. So you can see that if I go forward. We have grown, just as our metro area, over the past 10 years or since the turn of the century, at nearly a quarter of the total population growth of the state, just as that 2-county area, Madison and Limestone, which is huge. And where we really stack up well against those peer metros is in employment growth. You can see here we're on par regardless of the fact that Austin and Raleigh are defined by a much larger geographic area. And forward again. So labor force growth, again, the smaller way to quantify that, a 2-county area. If we were to include Morgan County and Decatur, or if the federal government rather were to redefine our metropolitan statistical area to be larger, which arguably it should be, those numbers would change as well. One thing we have remained constant at is salaries in the southeast. You can see we clearly are heading up at the top of those. Gives us a lot of disposable income and helps us to recruit retail venues that may not be aware of just how big and dynamic and full of disposable income this area is. We've led the state of Alabama over these years since 2000, all but 3 years in which we were number 2 for new and announced jobs. So those other 3 years in the yellow you see up there are tied to major automotive announcements elsewhere in the state. So there's a lot of good job growth going on up here. And the largest one by far is the base realignment and closure in 2005, where we received roughly 4,700 new direct federal jobs. And that's not including the contractor match jobs from the Boeings, the Lockheed Martins, the Northrop Grumman's, Raytheons, et cetera, that come in to support those federal missions. That's just the direct jobs. Then you look at a company like Verizon Wireless below that. They came in soon after the BRAC announcements because their business is very attracted to dependent spousal employees, people that trail along that need a job, and also their children who come up through 2-year and 4-year colleges who want a good paying job right out of school. Most of our growth has happened in these areas. Of course, Redstone Arsenal, which is a 38,000 acre city within a city. Cummings Research Park, which is the second largest research park in the country. It's the 4th largest in the world. If you count by the number of companies, we're actually larger than Research Park, Triangle Park in North Carolina. We have more companies. And arguably, if you put Redstone Arsenal and Cummings Research Park together, and they are just divided by an interstate highway, that's one of the largest research and technology development areas in the world. We also have in total 13 research and industrial parks that are prepared so that we can go out and recruit new business to come in, and they know that all they have to do is come and plug and play. They've got their sewer and their water, their electricity, everything that they would need to plop up a building and get going ready for them. And they're so well distributed around the county. Redstone Arsenal, you see this building here, this is the Sparkman complex. About 4,500 people go to work there every day, which is more than the Mercedes plant in Vance, North Carolina. One of our biggest challenges is you can go to a Mercedes showroom or watch TV and see a commercial, and you can see the G-Class or the R-Class or the C-Class, and know you can make that connection between those two things, the place that makes it and the object itself. What goes on here is not quite so easy, so it's a challenge for us in marketing to, you can't go to Walmart and buy a weaponized Predator UAV system. It's a good thing you can't, too. Probably some folks out there that might not use those for the best of uses. Anyway, you can see how full that parking lot is there, and that's just one of several similar facilities on the Arsenal, which is behind a secure gate, so most people don't see that and don't know what's going on there, but that is clearly the driver for our economy here. This is some of the stuff they do out in there. Satellites, the Hubble Space Telescope, James Webb before it got scuttled, the new space telescope, it may get reactivated. Missiles are our primary focus here, and those are ones that you carry on your shoulders or one that you deploy by other means, both in the ground or on vehicles. Army aviation, as I mentioned before, and with the most recent base realignment and closure of BRAC in 2005, we received all foreign military sales here. So you could go out to the Westin Hotel or one of our other hotels here, Embassy Suites next door, and see people wearing national dress from a friendly country that have come here to buy a set of helicopters or any other type stuff that we would sell them to help us try to keep the peace around the world. So that's a big change for the complexion and also the awareness, outside awareness of Huntsville here. And then lastly, you see there are IEDs and bombs. And one thing I think that's important to point out is that Redstone Arsenal is really not an arsenal anymore, and it's not a military base. There are less than 1,000 uniformed soldiers out there, but everything they do is for the warfighter. So in addition to what you have with the U.S. Army and with NASA, you have alcohol, tobacco, firearms, and the FBI, which are trying to tell you how to take out a bomb before it blows up or what to look for after it blows up. And they train first responders from all around the nation, and in some cases all around the world. So that's a bit of a snapshot on what goes on next door at the Arsenal. And that's about $50 billion in annual contracts that are managed there. The BRAC in 2005 was the largest jobs announcement for the state of Alabama. And that's pretty big because it's had some stiff competition when you think of ThyssenKrupp Steel and many of the other automotive announcements around the state. So it's very significant for this area and for the whole state. These are the things that we received in the last BRAC. These are the commands, the largest, or not physically or by personnel means the largest. The Army Materiel Command is probably the highest profile. That's a 4-star command. There are only 11 in the U.S. Army, and one of them came to Alabama. It's our first one. It's also run by the first female 4-star general in the history of U.S. military, General Ann Dunwoody. And then as a subset of her command is that United States Security Assistance Command, which sells everything the Army sells to our friendly nations. So some pretty neat stuff that's come in with that. The mayor's number of 800 million, and this one a little bit different. After the mayor spoke, he spoke of things that were not related directly to BRAC, like the Army Contracting Command and the Army Expeditionary Contracting Command, and other things that made sense for the government to move in here because they were complementary to things that were already happening here from a workforce and a technology standpoint. So creating greater cost efficiencies. So this is a really huge thing. This is just the 2005 BRAC that we're talking about and the benefit that it provides to the state of Alabama. A lot of those jobs, those 4,700 jobs, came here over a period of time. Remember, President Bush signed the law in 2005, and then we had to build a lot of buildings out there, about $500 million worth of buildings to accommodate all of these jobs moving in. And so far, we've tracked on those really well. We filled 86% of the jobs so far, and one of the biggest concerns we had at the outset of this process was, what if they come in and just hire people from local companies and, in effect, cannibalizing the workforce? That's not good for us at all. So we have been very proactive to go around the state, around the region, around the country, looking for people that can fill these jobs, and I'm happy to say that 59% of those 86% have come up from outside of the Tennessee Valley area. Starsville in Alabama, you betcha. We've got 13 general officers now out on Redstone Arsenal. And as Rick Davis, who was supposed to give this talk to you today, would say, that means all the good parking spaces are gone because they park wherever they want to. I don't have good Rick quotes, but I'm not going to use them yet today. Some of them are not appropriate. What you see there in the forefront of the picture is Von Braun Center, Building 3. It's the largest office building in the state of Alabama, and it's flanked there to the rear by VB 1 and 2. And that's basically, the main chunk of that is the Missile Defense Agency, which is a purple organization, meaning that it's not tied to any one service. It's a collaborative effort amongst all of the military services to protect our nation. These are new buildings. General Ann Dunwoody, if you look really closely on that building in the center, you'll see her terrace on the top there. She may be entertaining on it at the moment. I doubt it. She's probably looking through some kind of sighted scope and doing something to that effect. But anyway, huge new building. So very attractive, and makes it easier for us to recruit those people that are coming here from Northern Virginia or wherever to fill those jobs that were moved here. NASA also been out there for a long time. Their oldest buildings are really old, and so it made more sense to start rebuilding them from scratch for energy, for efficiency means, and also it's good for, we're constantly encouraging our local builders to go LEED now and build LEED certifiable buildings. Redstone Gateway, and I've got 34 seconds according to Oscar, is one of the newest, most exciting developments. It's right at Gate 9, the front of the arsenal, so basically the entrance to our community, and that's going to be over 4 million square feet, primarily of office, but also academic and some retail space, and that will allow us to continue to grow as Cummings Research Park fills up, which is a 3,800-acre research park, but there are only 450 acres of it left. So part of the vision that the community has had over the decades to move the airport out to the County Line Road, to make it easier to expand, to offer space to companies that are necessarily serving national critical missions on Redstone Arsenal, et cetera. This is what it looks like today. That's the first building out of the ground. I understand it's fully leased, and the second building is going to come out of the ground pretty soon. I understand it's partially leased, so a lot of interest there. Cummings Research Park, the crown jewel for us across the street from the Redstone Arsenal. And this was something that Von Braun told us when he came. You need a research park, you need a research university, you need a symphony orchestra. You need all of these things to complete your community and make it an attractive place for people to come do really cool things, which fortunately we've been able to manage over the past 6-7 decades. These are just some indications of projects that have gone on in the park since 2004, over 5 million square feet of new stuff, over $1 billion of investment. The mayor mentioned some of the accolades here. One of the top 10 smartest cities in the world is one of my favorite, but certainly the AAA bond rating, and receiving that in January of 2009 for the first time, and then having it repeated, given the timing of, remember January 2009, it wasn't a real good time. So that's pretty outstanding. And of course, kudos to the folks that gave us the photos. And if you have any questions about any of this, please see me afterwards. It's been a pleasure.
Thanks, Ethan. The information that he provides is just really, really incredible, and it's insightful. I know when I first got to Alabama, one of the things that you can't get behind the arsenal, as most of you know, without the stickers and having been military personnel. So they took us out there and they said, we'll treat you as a guest, and we'll kind of show you around and entertain you a little bit. Their idea of entertaining was, we're going to blow up a tank. So we sat there in a bus. Cindy Allen will remember this. We sat there in a bus, and all of a sudden we hear this whew, and this boom, and this tank blows up. So that's their form of entertainment out there. So a little twisted, but it works. It is with great honor and privilege that I get to introduce one of the most highly sought-after economists in the country, and he's here in Huntsville, Alabama. Dr. Lawrence Yun serves as the Chief Economist and Senior Vice President of Research for the National Association of Realtors. He directs research activity for the association and regularly provides commentary on real estate market trends for its 1 million members. 1 million realtor members. That's a lot of members. He appears regularly on financial news outlets and is a frequent speaker at real estate conferences throughout the U.S. USA Today in 2008 listed him among the top 10 economic forecasters in the country. Dr. Yun received his undergraduate degree from Purdue University and earned his PhD from the University of Maryland at College Park. Now, in case you get the two of us confused, he's the smart one and I'm the good-looking one, okay? So please help me give a big Alabama welcome to Dr. Lawrence Yun.
Thank you, Oscar, and thank you so much for the hospitality here in Alabama. This is my second visit to the state. My first time was, I believe, 2 years ago, or perhaps it was 3 years ago in Birmingham. And an advice was made to me to say, if you want at least half of the audience to really like you, you should say, roll tide. I'm quite impressed. In fact, I would be considered as one of the person whose jaws were dropping as those statistics were being rolled out. Quite impressed. Who would have thought that I grew up in South Carolina. I mean, I was born in South Korea, and at a very young age, my family came, and we settled in South Carolina, grew up there. And who would have, so I'm accustomed to the Southern culture, and many people have the preconceived notion in the South that it is a very sleepy atmosphere, but one sees the statistics for Huntsville. I mean, one is looking at a competition to the most highly technological, innovative city in the world. I mean, one can run that statistic, compare right next to San Jose, compare right next to Austin, compare right next to the Triangle region in North Carolina. So this is quite an impressive development that is going on, and it looks like continuing fast development going into the future. Now, related to the housing market and the economy is that about this time last year, most economists would have said that the economy would be growing, creating jobs at a respectable pace. Not a robust pace, but respectable. The reason why it was not going to be robust is that we went through this unprecedented housing market cycle. And it's going to take a little time for the housing market to adjust. And past data says that without housing market recovery, economy just cannot grow robustly. So we were in a time where housing market was going through a transition period. It looked like all the factors were lining up for a recovery in the housing sector, and hence for the economic, broader economic growth. But things began to really slow down early from this year. And now it raises the question, despite what may be occurring in some towns, some cities, like Huntsville and other cities where it's creating jobs, perhaps the nation will feel a large bump on the road and may even tip into a recession. I mean, there are some questions that are being raised on that issue. And tonight, President Obama will be making another speech related to the jobs. Perhaps this time it may work, or maybe it will not work, or maybe it causes even greater harm in terms of raising further deficit and debt, and that causes great uncertainty among the business people. They are sitting on cash, they don't like to see uncertainty, and they see huge federal budget deficit as a great uncertainty going forward. Let's run through some data as to see where we stand. First, this is the actual home sales nationally on an annual basis. Housing, you could say, cyclical business. Sometimes it's a boom year, other time a correction. And then one sees that during the blue line is the best fit over sort of a long time period. So assuming that nothing really changed in terms of mortgage rates, job growth was steady, economic environment was very steady. I mean, it's never like that because we live in a free market system, meaning that people have free choice to decide things. So it will always be some cycle. So one sees that during the boom years of 05, 06, we clearly overshot upwards. Then it corrected downward, but the past couple of years, past 3 years, one may even say, and we are going into the fourth year, that we are underperforming in relation to what it could be under normal circumstances. So in other words, there could be some pent-up demand developing, but that demand is yet to reach the market because of various obstacles that are present. A couple of obstacles, just lack of consumer confidence, and the others, which I hear frequently from our members, is that underwriting standard pendulum has completely swung the other way. It was very lax during the boom years. Anyone with a heartbeat, here's a loan for you. And now it's the case where people under normal circumstances with good credit would have been able to obtain a loan, yet they are not able to obtain a loan. So the pendulum having completely swung the other way. But the question is it ready to break out? The pent-up demand developing. Pent-up demand, well, we have population growth of 3 million each year in the country. People need some housing, and if home sales are not turning up, where are people living? Right now, people are living in cramped spaces. They are renting. Even among the renters, they are having that third roommate, fourth roommate, or young adults are returning back to their parents. So many people are living in squeezed, tight spaces, but this just cannot continue forever. It's just inevitable that it will be released into the market. And the economic recovery will help in that process, but the economy is hitting a severe headwinds at the moment. This is the monthly statistics. So you saw the home buyer tax credit brought the buyers back to the market, and then the tax credit subsequently got extended, and then we had the second surge, but the second surge was less strong than the first surge, implying that the potential pool who could respond to the tax credit were thinning out, and once the tax credit disappeared, the market severely went down. But note, after it went down, natural healing process brought the market steadily upward before the recent 4 months when it begins to slide down again. And the reason why it's sliding down in the recent 4 months is because the economy is losing momentum. After a harsh recession, the economy should be growing at 4, 5, 6%. 4, 5, 6%. In other words, your income should be rising on average 4, 5, 6%. This time it's not the case. The economy is struggling right along 1% at the moment. And is far below the desired pace, and as a result of the economy losing momentum, a discussion of economic stimulus. First, I'm not sure what President Obama will say. Certainly will not be the size of the first round of stimulus. It will be much modest in scale. But essentially, there's nothing left. There's no money left. I believe Margaret Thatcher once quipped that socialism works until the money runs out. Greece, Europe, money has already run out. Is whether Germany will decide to help European countries. Germany is the only country with money, whether they're willing to help out Greece or not in order to save the euro. In the U.S., the situation is not even close to what we are facing and what people in Greece are facing. So it's a much better situation, and I would say that downgrade by the Standard & Poor's of the U.S. credit rating, I mean, that was completely unjustified in my view, looking at all the data in relation to other countries. So it was unjustified, but nonetheless, a downgrade is clearly a signal. And also from the market point of view, anytime there's a downgrade, for example, your credit history gets hit, that means your borrowing cost rises. It's more expensive to borrow money. In the U.S., after the downgrade, U.S. government borrowing costs actually became cheaper, because what happened was that Standard & Poor's said, okay, you are downgraded, but from the point of view of global bond investors who are willing to lend money to the U.S., they said, we don't care about what Standard & Poor's say, we trust the U.S. So at least so far, they're willing to lend money to the U.S. at a very low interest rate. So that has not really impacted. But right now, the money is running out, deficits everywhere. You are seeing that local and state government, because they have balanced budget rules, they're slashing budget, they're slashing employees, and they're balancing the budget. But in the federal point of view, there's no balanced budget rules, and part of the stimulus requires either government spending increases or tax reduction, automatically leading to a larger budget deficit. Given that there is very little room from large budget deficit, any additional fiscal stimulus size will be very small. In fact, there is some discussion related to the housing market that will be impacted not tonight, but by Thanksgiving or by Christmas, which is that super committee has been set up. 12 members of Congress deciding how to reduce future budget deficit. And they are looking at mortgage interest deduction as potential revenue source. NAR is talking to every one of those members of Congress to assure that this has been in place for 100 years. It's something American middle class believe that this is part of the social contract that they have in terms of the consent of the government to say, you know, I'm willing to pay taxes, and we have the mortgage interest deduction in place from the time that income tax code was created, and we don't want you to touch it. So we want to assure that it doesn't get touched, but that's under discussion, and they will come out with some recommendation by Thanksgiving, and it will be voted on by Christmas time. But we don't know for sure whether the final recommendation will contain the mortgage interest deduction or not. If it is only trimming away, not complete elimination of mortgage interest deduction, most likely they will focus on either second homes or on the high income, but even that has a negative consequence to the broader housing market, and any obstacle to housing market recovery will mean an obstacle to broader economic recovery. Related to the monetary policy stimulus, there's also nothing left. Interest rate is already zero. You cannot put it below zero. In terms of the short-term funding rate, this is what the Federal Reserve directly controls. Federal Reserve does not control mortgage rate. They try to influence mortgage rate by doing the Fed funds rate to zero, but they cannot directly control. And also there's discussion about quantitative easing. And, you know, what is quantitative easing? Well, that's increasing balance sheet at the Federal Reserve. And when you say, what the heck is increasing balance sheet at the Federal Reserve? Well, in very simple language, printing a lot of money to buy U.S. government debt. And now some of the presidential candidates have come out vocally to say, stop printing money. And given that, even there's some political pressure applied about how much quantitative easing that could be done. In other words, the potential for stimulus is out. The weapons for stimulus has essentially been all used up. Any additional will be very marginal, and that very small margin may or may not have real direct impact to the economy. State and local government slashing jobs, again mentioned, while the federal government has been gaining jobs, except for the very recent 3 months when there was some slashing of the job, and that's part of the government stimulus program there. I'm from the Washington, D.C. area. I go across the country, and I see pains across the country, you know, whether one is in Kansas City, Las Vegas, Florida markets. I see a lot of pain. I live in Washington. But in Washington, the sidewalks are full, restaurants are full, and people are smiling, and it seems somewhat unfair, but one of the reasons is, with a great employment increase in Washington region, which did not suffer any recession whatsoever, so it was some of a bifurcation in terms of where the stimulus money really hit. It provided some help, but it really did not help in other parts of the country. Monetary policy. Fed funds rate is the red line. By the way, this PowerPoint will be available to you through the Huntsville Association of Realtors, so you can download it, and you can, some slides you may be able to actually work with clients in some way. So the red line is what the Fed actually controls. Fed funds rate is a short-term interest rate. Mortgage rate is something they do not directly control. And note that even the Fed funds rate can at times go up and down, mortgage rate may not really change all that much. And in fact, mortgage rate today, averaging today at 4.2%. Any monetary stimulus, meaning any further printing of the money to go buy government debt and so forth, may reduce mortgage rate from today 4.2 or 4.3 to 4%, say. May, and I don't put that as a definitive. It may do that. And I would say that would not have any impact. Or very non-meaningful impact. 4.3% is a historical, generational low, once-in-a-lifetime mortgage opportunity. Yet people are not taking it, or people cannot take it, because it's not about mortgage rates. Whether 4% or even 5%, it really doesn't matter. What really matters is the underwriting standards. It's the underwriting standard that is the great barrier, and hence, whatever the Federal Reserve decides to do, I mean, they have a meeting later this month, and whatever they may decide to do, it may not work all that much. Same thing as fiscal stimulus. What President Obama will be saying tonight, it may not have all that much impact, because all the weapons, in essence, has already been used up. In the meantime, because of so much printing of the money, consumer prices are rising. And this causes some uncertainty among people, and it may actually provide some uncertainty to the business community, and they may even be more hesitant about where to invest, because inflation is always associated with volatility, and businesses do not like volatility. One thing about rising consumer price inflation is certainly we go to shop, it hurts us, but some people will get protected. The Social Security recipients, past couple of years, zero cost of living adjustment. This year, by October, there will be an announcement about next year cost of living adjustment, and I think it's going to be about 3.5% cost of living adjustment for Social Security recipients. But people who are workers, their wages are rising only half the pace of inflation. In other words, you are working, for some people, getting a little higher salary, but that little higher salary is not even enough to compensate for the rising inflation that is occurring. People on commission income, it goes all over the place, and you see that things are much more expensive when you go to shops. Home sales in the state of Alabama. So one also sees some boom and bust, but the boom and bust do not really encounter. This is home sales, the actual transaction activity, boom and bust. So it's just back to about 1998 or year 2000 levels, 10 years ago levels, but certainly there's more population in Alabama compared to 10 years ago, so again implying that there could be some pent-up demand. But this also increase and decline was not associated with a price increase and price decline. In some markets where there is a very restricted new construction activity, when there's an increase in demand, it automatically translates into rising prices. So one sees a great bubble in coastal markets like San Francisco and some Florida markets where they cannot build so much due to the restriction of the land space. So there's a rise in prices. But in places like state of Texas, Alabama, there's a rise in demand, but there's no rise in prices because builders just respond to consumer demand. There's additional demand, builders build extra home, and there's always enough supply to keep up with demand. Huntsville home sales is doing much better than the state of Alabama. And in fact, one can say that it's only modestly lower from the peak level and is matching up to about year 2003 level. So it's doing much better compared to the national, is much doing better compared to the rest of the state. The year 2000 data, I'm not sure what's going on there. Maybe it's just a mistyping of the data, so it looks a bit anomalous on year 2000. But aside from year 2000, one can clearly see that that recent declines have been much more modest. It held on much better compared to the rest of the country, rest of the state. And this is the recent month-to-month sales activity for the recent 3 years, and one can see that in 2011, the most recent data, and I guess that is for the month of June, one can even say that it's soon, if that trend continue, that by, say, August, September, it may actually be the highest in the recent 3 years. So things are holding on much better locally. Prices, no great jump in prices, but steady increase in prices, and now because of a little weakening in sales, just leveling up in home prices on the just overall average. Of course, certain neighborhood you see price decline, so other neighborhoods slight price increase, but on average, things are fairly neutral. So much, much better condition here compared to any parts, just about any other parts of the country. New home sales continue to struggle. And the reason why the new home sales continue to struggle is not because people are not interested in buying new homes. It's just that builders are not building. If the builders build only 10 homes, at maximum they can only sell 10 homes. They cannot sell 20 homes. So the fact that the new homes are very depressed is a reflection not of weak demand, but is a reflection of weak new construction activity from a countrywide point of view. These are national data. And many of the builders will say, yes, it's been difficult. I don't want to build to compete with some of the foreclosed property, but I still see some niche where I can build and I see potential clients. They go to the bank and say, I want a construction loan. Banks say, forget about it. We don't lend construction loans. So the builders are really being hampered due to the lack of construction loans, even those who want to build, which also means that if this low level of new home construction was to persist for the next 2 years, then we could potentially encounter some form of housing shortage or beginning stage of housing shortage. Population increase 3 million each year. You are not building enough to support the population increases, and if this persists for a couple of additional years, we could really begin to feel the beginning stage of some shortage situation. Certainly, it doesn't feel that way, but if this was to persist, it could. Newly built home inventory for sales are at 40-year lows. Builders are not building. Whatever they are building is getting picked up, and the inventory of newly built home are at 40-year lows. Builders want to build more. Banks are saying, forget it. We don't do construction loans. So that's the stage regarding the new home construction market. Greater Huntsville metro market housing permits doing much better than the rest of the country. Again, just about every metric doing better than the rest of the country, so that there is a decline in recent years, but the decline has been much more manageable compared to what has been occurring at the national level. Improving factors for home sales. Actually, let's go from the middle and down. Improving factors. Economy is sluggish, but we are still creating jobs, net job creation, about 1 million annualized pace. Normal after recession, it should be 3, 4, 5 million jobs per year. We're not getting that 3 or 4 million jobs. We are getting only 1 million jobs. Still, 1 million is a positive, so there should be additional demand for housing. So there's some improvement in job market. The stock market, very volatile, but it's comfortably above 2008 levels, so there's some cash floating around for some high wealth individuals. The rents are beginning to rise. I mentioned about the Washington market. I have a couple of young colleagues in my office. Last year, they did not buy a home. They missed out on the home buyer tax credit. Why? They were young. They were not ready to settle down. They said, well, I just need a few more additional years to save for down payment and all the other reasons or whatever reasons. Early this year, they bought a home. And you say, of all the people, any other economist should have known the benefit of home buyer tax credit. What is going on here? They miss out on the home buyer tax credit. Well, Washington, again, is an unusual market stimulus. You know, they never suffer a recession. Well, our young colleagues, they were given a rent renewal notice saying that their rents will be rising 15 or 20%. They did a quick calculation, and they said it makes much more sense to buy a home than be a renter. So rents are beginning to rise, not only in Washington, but in many parts of the country. Now, the rent increases are not like the Washington increases. It may be 3%, 4% increases, but the rising rent will begin to tip some renters to say maybe buying a home makes better sense. So that, again, that's an improving factor. So you have job creation, stock market recovery, rising rent. Distressed property. When distressed property first came onto the market 3 years ago, people said, oh, it's a toxic stuff. We really want to stay far away from those kind of things. Well, over time, we are seeing now multiple bidding process on distressed property. People are feeling much more comfortable buying distressed property, provided that the prices are right. So there is a massive cleanup that is occurring in Miami, Vegas, large cash deals coming in to buy distressed properties. The international buying is a very small percentage component. Huntsville, in fact, would have larger exposure to international component. But some of the international buyers are saying their currency, whether it is Japanese yen, Brazilian real, Swiss franc, is much stronger now than before, and they can buy U.S. property at much deeper discount after the currency conversion. And smart money appears to be chasing real estate. There's a couple of wild cards. One hugely positive potential is lending begin to open up a bit, and the hugely negative is Washington policy change, which I will go into more detail. First, the jobs. So Great Recession, but the Great Recession is over. We are creating jobs, even though it's a sluggish pace. So we are creating about 1 to 1.5 million jobs each year. So that should at least be some positive for the housing. North Dakota, no housing market problem. Those jobs booming ahead. State of Texas, Rick Perry is running on the economy of state of Texas, is fully recovered. Houston, Dallas market, I think recent data show about 60,000 job creation in each of Dallas market as well as Houston in the past 12 months. So 60,000, how large is 60,000? One can think of a stadium full of people that have now jobs which they did not have last year. So Texas appeared to be fully recovered. Michigan, it's not a great recession, it's a great depression, and it's not only for 2 years, it's a 10-year lasting. If someone from Detroit goes on a podium to say this is a war, believe me, companies in Japan and Germany, they will not locate to Detroit. They will go to other places. In fact, one sees the advantage of the southern states, whether Kentucky, Tennessee, Alabama, South Carolina, North Carolina. Many of the foreign companies who decide there's a U.S. market, they want to sell products in the U.S., they decide to set up the plant in the southern states because they consider it to be more business-friendly environment. Alabama state as a whole, no recovery state as a whole. Interesting in a sense that southern state generally benefits a little faster than the nationwide. But if one looks at the long-term growth, so this is only for the past 10 years, but if one looks at for the past 40 years, one sees that recent decline is just a small bump on the road from the long-term growth potential. So even though there was a difficult for the state recently, one sees that in the long-term trend, it's just a bump along the road that will eventually be overcome. Huntsville, again, defies all odds of everything, so holding on much better. One data that I look closely every week is weekly unemployment insurance checks. How many people are filing for unemployment checks? Even in a good economy, people file for unemployment check. People lose jobs, people switch jobs, so there's always this going on. So during a Great Recession, way too many people file for unemployment checks. then it started to steadily go down. And it needs to go down below that red line to say that the economy is getting back to normal, good job creation. Suddenly it hit the red line and it refused to go below that line. It just sat there. And this is where we are today, meaning that sluggish economic recovery, not a robust economic recovery. Financial assets, stock market recovery, very volatile, but compared to 2008, a nice recovery. If you sold during that panic, you lost it. But if you held on, you at least saw some recovery coming. Housing equity has not recovered yet, at least nationwide basis. And this is critical. We need to start seeing housing market recovery. We don't want to see any bubble, but we want to see normal housing market recovery because this has been the source of fund for many small business startups. If you are small business entrepreneurs, don't have a name other than your own personal name, and you go to Wall Street to say, I want to issue Lawrence Yun bonds and I want to raise cash. Well, forget it. You cannot do that. Small businesses rely on other forms of capital. You cannot rely on Wall Street capital. Even going to the banks are sometimes difficult. Small businesses many times start from their own savings, and their own savings are often tied to their real estate, their housing equity. And as long as housing equity do not recover, it means that small business startup will be slow in recovery, and we know that small businesses are key to very healthy, robust U.S. economic recovery, and hence any harm to the housing market will mean harm to the broader economy. Rents beginning to rise, consumer price index apartment rent. Rent in relation to home price. So home price is the blue line, rent is the red line. So from 1980, things were lined up 1-to-1 each year. Then suddenly during the bubble years, things got out of whack. Now you correct it, and one may even say home values are somewhat underpriced in relation to the rent index. So again, great bargain opportunity, but the question is whether or not buyers can respond to these incentives. Some buyers who want to reach the market are thinking, do they have the confidence or not? Level up some financial stability where people who own property, real estate, because they can always, real estate just rise with any other value. So America will certainly not encounter any hyperinflation despite all the talk of printing of the money. High inflation, maybe. High inflation of 5% is a possibility, and some people who want to protect against that, they have been buying gold, but now maybe some people are beginning to think about real estate as that potential hedge. Actually several anecdotal, I'm hearing that some of the baby boomers are buying homes for their kids, all cash. So the baby boomers have an option. $100,000 sitting in the bank, what do you get? $2 interest. $100,000, you buy a real estate and let your kids pay 6 or 7% mortgage rate on it. So your kids have a home, and you are getting much decent return on your return. So we are beginning to hear very small, something of that. Upper end also, we are beginning to see, at least according to the data, some movement in the upper end market. So inflation hedge, this is the data on consumer price inflation and real estate prices, always moving in similarly. Only time the relationship broke down was during the bubble and burst. The relationship broke down during the bubble and the burst. But that period is over. Now we're back to just normal situation. So now the question is whether real estate prices will follow general consumer price inflation prices. I mentioned about the Social Security check cost of living adjustment to be about 3.5% because consumer price inflation is 3.5%. But there also appear to be many inflationary pressure building in the pipeline that is not yet appearing for the consumers. Producer price index, what the producers are paying for their products. For finished product, prices are up 7%. For intermediate products, it is up 12%. For early stage of production, crude products, it is up 22%. Commodity prices up much higher, gold prices near record high, implying that perhaps even though consumers face 3.5% inflation, there could be more inflation on the way because the pipeline pressure is building. Now, one thing about producer price index is that it tends to be volatile. It can go up a lot, then it can go down a lot quickly. But so far, it's been going up, up, up without really down. So it remains to be seen whether the pipeline inflationary pressure began to actually come into the consumer price inflation. Consumer confidence index, again, holding back home buying activity. Some slight recovery after 2008 financial market crisis, but nothing back to normal. 100 would be considered normal, or the red line would be considered normal. And in recent months, tanking again, going down again. There is no consumer confidence. People don't feel right about the country. And as a result, they're very hesitant to pull the trigger. Spending for food, clothes, other items appears to continue to increase. There are only two items that are remaining sluggish from consumer spending point of view. Second most expensive expenditure item, autos, remain sluggish. And the first most expenditure item, home sales, remain sluggish. So consumer confidence has really hit those big, large ticket items from coming back. One other thing I mentioned about predict presidential election outcome is the following. This consumer confidence index was created, I think, 1960 by a New York firm, and they just ask consumers questions, how is your job, how is your finances, various questions, and they come up with a number. And they noted that any time the index is above 100, the incumbent party easily wins re-election at the presidential level. If it is under 100, incumbent party loses. It predicted every single time, it predicted every single time except for year 2000. When year 2000, it would have implied that consumer confidence was high, so that after Bill Clinton's party still should have won, except that was the only time it did not work. And some people will say, well, if you look at the popular vote, it's actually a different story. But this is implying that if election was held today, President Obama is very vulnerable, if assuming the consumer confidence can replicate their past prediction on the presidential outcomes. I would also note that Ronald Reagan back in 1983 also had a fairly low consumer confidence, but it quickly changed within an 18-month time span. So whether or not there is enough time for President Obama to make a strong comeback, well, it remains to be seen. But if it's like this during election time, I think it's pretty much there will be a change in party at the White House. Upside potential. I mentioned about tight underwriting standards. I talked to the media about it, and the media always say, realtors always complain there's not enough home sales. Now they're overreacting about the lending standards. Where's the proof? Where's the proof? Well, here's the proof. Freddie, Fannie, FHA, the dominant mortgage provider. Without them, there will be essentially no mortgage. Under normal times, the credit scores of Fannie and Freddie Mac mortgage would be about 720, FHA 650. Recent years, credit scores of those people who are approved, credit scores are 760 on Fannie Freddie and about close to 700 on FHA. So I did a little simulation, assumed that underwriting standard were to go back to normal. I mean, this is not lax, just normal back to like year 2000 level. Well, how many additional home sales there will be? There will be about 15 to 20% additional home sales, inventory that much lower, home prices clearly on an upward trajectory, which means that housing equity recovery, small businesses now become optimistic, they want to start small businesses. So many good things can happen, yet it is the credit stringent requirement that is really holding back housing recovery as well as the broader economic recovery. Downside potential, Washington policy change. QRM, 20% down payment. After Dodd-Frank bill passed, the regulators started going to their back offices and try to draw up what that means. And they say, well, what that means is that if people want to buy a home, they have to come up with 20% down payment. And the rule will go into effect from middle of next year unless they decide to change what they think it needs to be. We have provided large data analysis to the agencies, and we hope it doesn't go to the 20% down payment, because what is important about successful home ownership is it's not about down payment. It is about staying within your budget. If you see a person willing to make 20% down payment but want to buy $1 million home way over their budget, they're going to run into trouble. But if a person is willing to stay well within their budget, 3.5% down payment FHA, they can be successful. It's all about staying within their budget, and we want to assure that QRM rule, or something called Qualified Residential Mortgage Rule of 20% down payment, does not impact. And in fact, FHA down payment 3.5%, Veterans Affairs VA loan down payment 0%, FHA VA. They have something equivalent to Fannie and Freddie, which is called Ginnie Mae. Ginnie Mae never asked a single dime of taxpayers' money. In fact, this year they forked over several $1 million over to the U.S. Treasury because they had money left over from all the premiums that was received. So it actually reduced budget deficit. I mean, it's an infinitesimal amount. So it was not a harm to taxpayer at all. So they need to look at what works and what doesn't work. Fannie and Freddie clearly made a mistake in terms of private profit during good years, set up a huge hedge fund during the good year, big bonus payments during the down year. What do you know? Taxpayers on the hook. Imagine you go to the bank and say, I want to borrow $10 billion. And banks say, oh, forget about it. Well, Fannie and Freddie could do that. They could go to the bank and say, I want to borrow $10 billion. And they say, why should I lend you that money? Well, we have government backing. So they will borrow any amount of money, create a hedge fund. During the good years, it was good. But during the downturn, because of that implied government backing, taxpayers are on the hook, and we need to assure that that does not ever repeat itself. It's too short for me to explain what NAR is recommended, but we want to assure that never happens. The limits of mortgage interest deduction I mentioned, that is appears to be on the table. We want to assure that it's not on the table by Thanksgiving when that issue comes out. The loan limit appears to be heading downward. We're fighting hard, but there's no interest in trying to keep the loan limit where it is. And Fannie and Freddie, again, it was a flawed model, and we need to assure that it doesn't, that this doesn't occur. This is a photo from my BlackBerry, and you can actually see my BlackBerry, that little black part. At the National Museum of American History, I was walking there, and I found this, and I had to click it. And I clicked it, and you cannot read it because it's too small. But a couple of important statements. 4 million no down payment VA loan for World War II veterans. Think, 1950, 1960, do we have foreclosure crisis in the U.S.? No, even though there was no down payment for so many people to buy a home. And it also says that it fueled an unprecedented growth in America's middle class. So you did a tremendous thing. So again, it's not about down payment, it's about staying within your budget. So as long as people stay within their budget, they will not run into trouble. So my baseline outlook is for moderate economic expansion. I don't really see a second recession. I think there are too many improving factors. The only thing that's missing is really the consumer confidence, which is missing. So it will be moderate expansion, not a robust expansion, translating into about 1 million jobs each year. I mean, it should be 4 or 5 million jobs. In fact, one may even say during a Great Recession, 8 million jobs were lost. Using a football analogy, you gave up 8 touchdowns. Now you score 1 touchdown. We created 1 million jobs, 1 touchdown. There's a long way to go, and you wish you can quickly score 4 touchdowns to get back more closer to normal. So we need to get that 3 or 4 million job creation. We are not getting that. We're only getting 1.5 million job creation. Mortgage rate, I think all the factors point towards a slight upward movement, but I think mortgage rate movements are not really that important compared to underwriting standards. Home sales, I think will be all dependent on the local economy, like North Dakota. Home sales continue to increase because of good job market conditions. Home values, again, nationwide are no meaningful change, but locally there will be some great variations. I think Miami actually may surprise next year. Miami prices could be about 10% higher compared to what it is today because of great overcorrection and multiple bidding that is occurring in the Miami area. But broadly, many southern states, from Georgia all the way to the state of Texas, outside of the Florida, they tend to be very stable. So it's always a normal price increases, and hopefully you have some inventory drawdown so that you can return to a very normal situation. You did not encounter any major price decline, a good thing, but just trying to get back to normal. This is my final slide. Given that there is a mortgage interest deduction discussion, and also you see sometimes like Time magazine, Newsweek magazine, front cover, maybe home ownership is oversold. Maybe a nation of homeowners is not where we want to be. Maybe there's nothing wrong with renting. But let's keep in mind that America is one of the most stable countries in the world. Egypt. Who would have predicted that things would have just turned over in Egypt very quickly? Even CIA would not have predicted. And one economist believed that 90% of Egyptians did not have a clear title to the residence they were living in. So you are in a situation where you don't really know whether you own the property or you are part of the country. So something small happens and it snowballs and snowball becomes bigger and bigger, and things, you have a revolution. America is a very, very stable society. And I think two most transformative presidents of the last century, one Democrat, one Republican, clearly recognize inherently in their mind that mortgage interest deduction, this many costs to the budget deficit and all that, they said, forget about that. I want to see a nation of homeowners. I believe home ownership stabilized the middle class, stabilized the country. There are many potential benefits from it. And FDR during World War II, he saw many countries flip over, dangerous situations, say nation of homeowners is unconquerable. You own the land, you will fight for your land. Ronald Reagan came to the NAR convention and said, during the tax reform time of his, during tax reform of his presidency, came to a National Association of Realtors convention and said, we will preserve part of the American dream, which the mortgage interest deduction symbolizes. So we are using this two presidential quote in all our testimony in Congress. So hopefully they understand that there's the intangible great value in having a nation of homeowners, and something that has been in place for 100 years, maybe this is something that we do not really want to touch. And certainly, budget deficit is large. We need to address the budget deficit. We cannot have this hanging around on our horizon forever, so we need to address it, but recognize that mortgage interest deduction was not the source of this blowout in budget deficit. And something that has been in place for 100 years, it was not the source of the recent housing market bubble. So clearly recognize what the American have, in essence, signed a social contract about the home ownership, certain aspect of the tax code, and if you get some call to action from NAR, and it may come in October, it may come in November. Hopefully it doesn't come. If it doesn't come, that means that this issue would be a non-issue. And so we will be working hard. We have many information on our website. I have a very great staff economists who analyze daily trend, daily housing market data and others, so you can go to our website and check out more information. Thanks for your patience, and thanks for listening. I'm very happy to be here. Thank you.
If you have, does anyone have any questions? Would Dr. Yoon said he would be glad to entertain any questions you may have. Yes, sir, in the back. No. I'm sorry. Oh, he's gone. What NAR is doing to relieve the problem? With lending.
I think I will take about 5 questions. And hopefully those 5 are those that I can answer. The lending question. The thing about lending is very difficult in a sense that we cannot influence private companies, banks, Wells Fargo, Bank of America. They are private companies, but our NAR president have had meeting with all the top executives of the banks to explain all this data. In fact, there's an opportunity to make money by lending because it looks like a very low default rate situation. So the response that we get is, yes, we see that we will begin to perhaps open the lending. Nothing happens. So after the discussion, now banks are regulated, so we talk to FDIC, we talk to other government agencies about this, and again, they don't know what the solution to this is. And aside from any actual push from regulation, private companies make private decision, is we just have to hope that banks have been making profits after profits recently, and their cash reserves are rising. And in fact, their cash reserves are so high, it will exceed any stress test levels. They went through the stress test, how much cash do you have after the stress levels, and they have plenty of cash. So perhaps the banks will just go back to the business for which they were created, to lending, and I think that catalyst would be that they recognize they have a huge cash reserve, and it's just a matter of time that they have to use that cash reserve in some way rather than just holding on to it. So so unless you have a great suggestion, which you can talk to me afterwards, that this is what has been occurring. Yes, we do hear that even though the bank executives want to lend more, the key administration people want to encourage banks to lend more, but at the actual decision of individual loans, anytime a bank officer makes a loan, bank examiner comes over and says, why did you make the loan? So a large question about that, and just uncertain environment related to regulatory issues.
Any other questions?
More questions.
Wow.
Comment on the changes in commission income as it relates to our unemployment rate.
Comment related to?
Changes or reductions in commission income nationwide as it relates to reflected or not being reflected in the unemployment rate, as it relates to the real unemployment rate, I should say.
Well, the unemployment rate always counts. They ask, there's a telephone survey, is a sample, it's not everyone in the country. It's a survey of sample of people that asking a very simple question: do you have a job? Do you don't have a job? Do you have a part-time job? And so forth. So there is, that's how they compute the unemployment rate consistently. So there's no changes in any computation on unemployment rate. Then there's always this part-time job and people who are discouraged, who don't have a job, they don't want to look for a job. And so the real unemployment rate is always higher. So even during good times, when unemployment rate is 5%, people may say real unemployment is actually 8%. Well, today unemployment rate is 9.5. Real unemployment could be just several percentage points higher. Question? Yes, I can.
This sort of relates to the first question. 2 months ago, David Bernanke was giving one of his speeches. He said there are 3 things we could do to help. Number 2 is reduce the rate that banks are getting from the Fed. Is that difficult? I mean, that seems to be a real simple fix, but nobody seems to be pushing that.
You put your money in the bank for short term, and banks will give you 0. That cash that banks are holding on to, they deposit into the Federal Reserve, and they get a 1/4 percentage point. I mean, it's a small percentage point, but if you have billions and billions of dollars, it quickly adds up quickly. So money that you put into the bank, banks are immediately turning around and parking over at the Federal Reserve and not lending it out, and they're earning interest on that. And one way to negate that incentive is to say, if you park your money at the Federal Reserve, we're going to give you 0. So perhaps that will force banks to think about other opportunities. 2 more questions. All right, very good crowd. Thank you very much.
Before you all go, we'd like to present Dr. Yoon as a token of our appreciation from the Rocket City, Huntsville, Alabama, where the sky is not the limit, with this Columbia Space Shuttle thermal tile representing Columbia's missions from 1981 to 2003, along with NASA's official STS-1 and STS-7 emblems. Thank you, Lawrence. The summit is adjourned. Thank you all very, very much for coming, and I appreciate your support and help. Thank you.